Good morning, class 10. This is the continuation of the lesson Nelson Mandela's Long Walk to Freedom. It is from these comrades in the struggle that I learned the meaning of courage. Time and again, I have seen men and women risk and give their lives for an idea. I have seen men stand up to attacks and torture without breaking, showing a strength and resilience that defines the imagination. I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear. No one is born hating another person because of the color of his skin or his background or his religion. People must learn to hate, and if they can learn to hate, they can be taught how to love. For love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite. Even in the grimmest times in prison, when my comrades and I were pushed to our limits, I would see a glimmer of humanity in one of the guards, perhaps just for a second, but it was enough to reassure me and keep me going. Man's goodness is a flame that cannot be man's goodness is a flame that can be hidden but never extinguished. In the previous video, we talked about the swearing in ceremony of Nelson Mandela. The first part of the text was read, and you can refer to the previous video. The explanation was in detail, and the oral comprehension check, we have to do it now for the text which I read just now. So this is the continuation of the video which had been posted earlier. The detailed explanation is given there, and the text which I have read now is the gist of whatever Mandela has been sacrificing, whatever they had done. He says that whenever he was in prison, even in his grimmest form, he would see that love comes to a person. We are all humans, and it is natural to love. More than hate, love comes to us first. He says that even though he was locked down, he and his comrades were locked down in the cell, even for just a second, the guards would show him humanity, and that was enough for him, and to rekindle his faith that okay, they can win the freedom. The entire lesson is about Nelson Mandela's struggle to freedom, and he gets nostalgic on the particular day that he was being sworn in as the first South African president, and the coming of the two democracies together. That means there will be only it will be a democracy now, and people will not be looked down for their color or for their skin tone, and they will be looked down as a human being first, and they are given their freedom. So here you can read the text completely, and there are 2-3 sentences which are very important. Is I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. That means the courage is not, it is not that we are courageous when we are not fearful. It is not that, but the absence of fear. Courage is the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear. That means Mandela was trying to conquer that fear. Will I be able to get freedom? Will I be able to get freedom for my fellow people? Because so many people had sacrificed their lives. And even in the previous video, the list of all the people, the photos, the everything is given here. You can check with the names and everything. And these people, everybody had sacrificed their lives for the so-called freedom which Mandela was talking here about. And when we go to the next part of the lesson on page 21, in life every man has twin obligations to his family, to his parents, to his wife and children, and he has an obligation to his people, his community, his country. In a civil and humane society, each man is able to fulfill those obligations according to his own inclinations and abilities. But in a country like South Africa, it was almost impossible for a man of my birth and color to fulfill both of these obligations. In South Africa, a man of color who attempted to live as a human being was punished and isolated. In South Africa, a man who tried to fulfill his duty to his people was inevitably ripped from his family and his home and was forced to live a life apart, a twilight existence of secrecy and rebellion. I did not in the beginning choose to place my people above my family, but in attempting to serve my people, I found that I was prevented from fulfilling my obligations as a son, a brother, and a father and a husband. Mandela is Mandela is worried about his obligations in life because he was a son, he was a father, and he was a brother, and he was a husband. But he says that now he has twin obligations, one towards his family, and the second one, the first one towards his family, and the second one is the of a leader, because he wanted to achieve freedom, he wanted to get the freedom. Now he is unable to make the balance between the two obligations which he has chosen, so he is sacrificing his family obligations, that means as a brother, as a husband, as a father, and as a son. So he is giving priority to his people and his obligations. I was not born with a hunger to be free. I was born free, free in every way that I could know. Free to run in the fields near my mother's hut, free to swim in the clear stream that ran through my village, free to roast mealies under the stars and ride the broad backs of slow moving bulls. As long as I obeyed my father and abided by the customs of my tribe, I was not troubled by the laws of man or God. It was only when I began to learn that my boyhood freedom was an illusion, when I discovered as a young man that my freedom had already been taken from me, that I began to hunger for it. At first, as a student, I wanted freedom only for myself, the transitory freedoms of being able to stay out at night, read what I pleased, and go where I chose. Later, as a young man in Johannesburg, I yearned for the basic and honorable freedoms of achieving my potential, of earning my keep, of marrying and having a family, the freedom not to be obstructed in a lawful life. But then I slowly saw that not only was I not free, but my brothers and sisters were not free. I saw that it was not just my freedom that was curtailed, but the freedom of everyone who looked like I did. That is when I joined the African National Congress, and that is when the hunger for my own freedom became the greater hunger for the freedom of my people. So all this passage is self-explanatory, and Mandela, till now, he never had experienced that he was not free. He said that he will not. He's what he says is, I was not born with a hunger to be free. I was born free, free in every way that I could know. He wanted to run in the fields, he wanted to be a normal boy. All this also he was restrained, and whatever he did, all these, whatever he explains here, running through the village and roasting maize under the stars and ride the broad backs of slowing bulls, all these he was able to do. But when it came to bigger things like his education, like keeping his earnings and getting married, to starting a family, all this was not, he was not readily, and he could not do it as per his wish. He could not read the books he wanted to read, he could not go out whenever he wanted to, but he thought that he had the freedom, but in fact he did not. And he realized that not only himself but also the people belonging to his land, that means his brothers and sisters, also were under the same restrictions. So now he began to thirst for that freedom. And this was the actual quest. And it was their desire for the freedom of my people to live their lives with dignity and self respect that animated my life, that transformed a brightened young man into a frightened young man into a bold one, that drove a law abiding attorney to become a criminal, that turned a family loving husband into a man without a home, that forced a life loving man to live like a monk. I am no more virtuous or self sacrificing man than the next man. But I found that I could not even enjoy the poor and limited freedom I was allowed when I knew my people were not free. Freedom is indivisible. The chains on any one of my people were the chains on all of them. The chains on all of my people were the chains on me. I knew that the oppressor must be liberated just as surely as the oppressed. A man who takes away another man's freedom is a prisoner of hatred. He is locked behind the bars of prejudice and narrow mindedness. I am not truly free if I am taking away someone else's freedom, just as surely as I am not free from my when my freedom is taken from me. The oppressed and the oppressor alike are robbed of their humanity. So that was the end of the lesson, the end of the text. It 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 started with the inauguration of Nelson Mandela being sworn in as the president, and clearly when it comes to the end of the text, he talks about how much he yearned for the freedom, and he talks about the freedom that these people who are not giving them freedom, they are narrow minded, they are selfish, they do not have the broad thinking capacity, they cannot accept people for what they are. And he also blames them for not being a democratic place, just because the people are colored, they are not given the equal right. So actually uh, he was a lawyer, but he becomes a criminal for them. And a loving man, he turns into a hatred man. A loving husband, he disattaches himself from the family, he disattaches from his wife, and he detaches, and he completely, he's on his own, and he joins the African Congress. And then from there, he struggles for the freedom and the journey, and the complete thing, the final one which we have got there is the swearing in ceremony, the swearing in ceremony of the national thing which happens, and Nelson Mandela is sworn in as the first president. Yes, but as of now, you can go through the comprehension checks at the end of the lesson, and the worksheets and the assignments will be sent to you. Please do it in the book, in your home book, whichever you have been assigned, and you can bring them back to school when you come back in June.